Coming up on Network Africa, leaders of Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal meet U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House in Washington, D.C. The 5 African leaders support nomination of President Trump for Nobel Peace Prize. And the European Commission describes move preventing its ministers and commissioners entry into eastern Libya as a protocol issue. Hello everyone and welcome to the program. Joke Rogers here in Lagos. The Nigerian government has reacted to the U.S. government's announcement and implementation of a visa reciprocity schedule for Nigerian citizens, limiting the validity of non-immigrant visas, including the B1, B2, F, and J categories, to 3 months with single entry. A statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the government views the development with concern and keen interest, particularly given the long-standing cordial relationships and strong people-to-people ties between the two countries. It says the decision appears misaligned with the principles of reciprocity, equity, and mutual respect that should guide bilateral engagements between friendly nations. The statement says Nigeria notes that this restriction places a disproportionate burden on Nigerian travelers, students seeking academic opportunities, professionals engaging in legitimate businesses, families visiting loved ones, and individuals contributing to cultural and educational exchanges. While acknowledging the sovereign right of every country to determine its immigration policies, Nigeria respectfully urges the United States to reconsider this decision in the spirit of partnership, cooperation, and shared global responsibilities. Diplomatic engagements are ongoing, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs remains committed to pursuing a resolution that reflects fairness and upholds the values of mutual interest. Well, yesterday, U.S. President Donald Trump hosted the leaders of 5 African countries at the White House for talks and a working lunch. The leaders were from Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal. During the lunch, the U.S. President hailed the leaders, saying they were from very vibrant places with very valuable land, great minerals, great oil deposit, and wonderful people. Mr. Trump also complimented Liberian President Joseph Boakai on his mastery of the English language, saying, "Such good English, where did you learn to speak so beautifully?" President Boakai appeared to chuckle as President Trump retorted, "In Liberia? That's very interesting. I have people at this table who can't speak nearly as well." President Boakai had earlier commended the U.S. for being a longtime friend of Liberia, saying he believed in the policy of making America great again.
Mauritania is a great country in the sense of its strategic position. It is on the Atlantic coast, which makes it a neighbor to the U.S. It is what unites North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, or what links the two. That is its strategic position, but also in terms of resources. We have a great deal of resources. Many, many resources. And we have a lot of opportunities to offer in terms of investment. We have minerals, rare earths, rare minerals. We have manganese. We have uranium. And we have a good inclination that we have lithium and other minerals. We're the second largest producer for the last 60 years in Africa of iron ore. We produce a lot. And we have a lot of resources in our seawaters, so lots of fishing and whatnot. I don't want to spend too much time on this.
But I appreciate it very much. I appreciate it. Maybe we're going to have to go a little bit quicker than this because we have a whole schedule. If I could just, your name and your country would be great. Thank you, please.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Presidente Trump, e sobretudo.
Thank you, Mr. President, and for welcome everything. For us, it's the second time here to come as a guest. The first time we had that meeting in Guinea-Bissau, but I will not talk so much. But Guinea-Bissau is a peaceful country. We are a small country, but we are a great state. Not a great state like the United States, but we are a great country as well. And we are be following your dynamics and the war with Russia and Ukraine.
Recent celebration of your 249th anniversary. We did in Liberia at your embassy. Mr. President, we thank you for this opportunity to be here. Liberia is a longtime friend of the United States, and we believe in your policy of making America great again. And we also go a long way with you in your diplomacy that has to do with economic development and commercial friendship. Liberia has a lot of minerals, and one of the things we ask as good friends for a long time is the opportunity to do a survey of our minerals. Mm-hmm. And also we are committed to peace, and we've been very lucky within our region. We are a country that have had a series of democratic elections, and our country has been cooling down. And also we want to encourage American involvement in the investment in Liberia. Yeah. We'd like to see that happen.
In the meantime, the 5 African leaders who visited the White House expressed their support for the nomination of President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. This followed a question from a journalist during a discussion session who asked the leaders if they are considering nominating President Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize.
And for the African leaders, my question is, as you can see, President Trump is working to bring peace, not only in Africa, but also in the world. Are you all considering to nominate President Trump for a Nobel Prize Peace?
On soutient cette dynamique.
We are in favor of this dynamic for peace. We are very committed on peace. I am the first head of state who went to Russia and who went to Ukraine, both, since the start of the war. I held the presidency of ECOWAS, and I went to see Mr. Putin. We spoke for 4 hours, and then I went to Ukraine. I spent 12 hours on a train to speak to President Zelensky. But now the weight of President Trump is something else altogether. We are with you. We are behind you to see what we can do to help bring peace back. No one wins when there's war. So you have our support so that we can... A Nobel Peace Prize, while I don't see any problem with it, I think that President Trump deserves it for all the efforts that he's worked on. And he brought peace back in the SIAC region. That is my region, the region where DRC and Rwanda signed a deal. And so he is now bringing peace back into a region where that was never possible. So I believe that he does deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. That is my opinion on this.
Continue to support America in the strength to be able to bring about peace in the world. America is a melting point and also a country that we all look forward to. And I want to encourage you, because without peace, we can't have a world to live in. And we stand with you on that.
forgive me for saying this, but unfortunately, I don't really understand. I don't know how things work when it comes to Nobel Prizes, but I can guarantee you that Mauritania would never be opposed to President Trump receiving a Nobel Peace Prize. It's not a matter of voting amongst our countries, but what is for sure is that the results and the work has been done in such a short amount of time show that you would be a good recipient. And I'm sure that the jury sees that and the rest of the world sees it as well and understands it. When the time comes, I think everyone will see that it is a deserved prize. Congratulations on what you've done so far.
Let's discuss all this, shall we? Joining me now is Public Affairs Analyst PoliticsToday. Thank you for standing by. Great to see you on the program again today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure always.
Right. So the U.S. President Donald Trump has not made one visit to Africa, whether it was during his first term as president or now the few months he has been in office. But he's able to invite these leaders to the White House. What do you make of U.S. interests in the choice of the countries attending this meeting in Washington?
Yeah, but let me just divert a little bit. I'll get back to your question immediately. You know, the lady that asked that trick question, because it's a trick question. What did she expect the African leaders to say? No, Trump does not deserve a Nobel
Exactly.
Peace Prize. So it was inevitable that they were going to respond. She was the one that she was in the White House a few weeks ago and was in the go-between between Felix Tshisekedi and the White House, over this crisis in the Congo. Now, back to your question. Yeah, the choice of these African countries to visit the White House. I think, obviously, when the Trump administration first slammed some sanctions on African countries, I can't remember the number now. There was the first time, maybe about 7, 8 African countries, and then it was expanded, and involving other African countries. Part of what they said, the criteria for the actions they took against these African countries is that they had not gotten their acts together, and they needed, to get their acts together. Of course, the issue of violence, and if you go through them, about 80% of those countries that were sanctioned them by the United States were countries that were in crisis or conflict. And so you can see some of these African leaders also talking about the relative peace in their own countries. And I think that is what it's all about. This meeting is symbolic. It's not as if these countries are, very big, of a very strategic national interest to the United States. That's why I say it's more of a symbolic. Countries like Nigeria, of course, the kind of resources that we have, the population and all that. But again, Nigeria has been a country that's been embroiled in all manners of crisis and conflicts and all that. So if you look at the criteria, over which some countries were sanctioned, then obviously Nigeria, it's not included. And then that is why some of these African countries that were invited have been invited. But it is obviously not going to stop at that because they are thinking of expanding it much later, to involving a broader meeting of African leaders.
And this is nothing like, what we had when President Barack Obama was in office. He started the U.S.-Africa Summit, which invited essentially all leaders from the 54 African nations, I think with the exception of Somalia also. But since then, America's relations with Africa, has been up in the air and with not much of a change in policy. Do you think this could change under President Trump's second term?
Very much so, very much so. Of course, there's a lot of competition out there, and I think the Chinese are giving the Americans a run for their money. The African continent used to be the domain of the Americans and the British, and then for whatever reasons, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the breakdown of the Iron Curtains, all of a sudden they did not find Africa as perhaps as interesting or as profitable as she used to be, and then they stayed away, and then the Chinese came in. And now you have some of these other countries, the British, the Americans coming in, and it's going to be a fierce competition because the Chinese are not going to give away any inch, or of the African continent in terms of the deals and the trades that they are doing with Africa. And so it's a problematic. Of course, you know that some of these meetings that you talked about, the one initiated by Obama, we have seen a replication of these meetings. We had, that even as far as yes, we would understand that of Russia, maybe to some extent, African countries going to Russia in the past few years. The same thing also happened, of course, with China. That has been a regular meeting of all the heads of state of Africa. And then we also had the same thing in France, had the same thing in Turkey. And I think it got to a level where people began to say, look, I mean, why must Africa go cap in hands to some of these other countries? That we should have some dignity. Especially after all, Africa should be the beautiful bride. Africa should have what every other person wants. So we must be in a position to be able to, if we play our politics right, we should be able to get some of these countries to treat Africa with much more respect. And under the Biden administration, when he sent Anthony Blinken to Nigeria and Africa, it was the same thing. He was trying to win, Africa away from the Chinese. And so the competition has been on for quite some time. So let's see, how it's going to go. Let's see how it's going to develop.
Right. I'll be letting you go in just a few seconds. But, Trump, one of the most, obvious parts of this meeting, although we didn't get to hear that now, is the President Trump's interaction with the Liberian president, which showed how little he knew about these African countries or of their leaders. His ignorance was quite pronounced when he was surprised the Liberian president learned to speak English in Liberia and not anywhere else.
Well, I think normally, the accusations against Trump, the controversies around Trump, I think whatever criticism he would have received was blunted by the fact that he said he knows some people in this space that do not speak English as well as the Liberian president. So hopefully, he was also talking about people that work, under him at the White House. Obviously, that response, I mean, that statement from him spoke volumes about his knowledge and ignorance of the African continent. But it has been like that for quite some time with some American presidents. Under the George W. Bush Jr. at the time was asked about countries, very strategic, partners to the United States. He didn't seem to know much about Hong Kong. He didn't know what was going on in Taiwan. So it happens. And perhaps it's the arrogance of the average American that most Americans, they see, some people see Africa as a continent. I mean, as a country. So it is something that we need. And again, you might not blame them so much. Africa has not been able to stand its ground in the committee of, in the international, arena. We had about just Africa in terms of, global, production output. Africa just contributes about 2%. 2% to 2.5% to global, output. And so when you consider this, it's not the kind of data, that you want a lot of countries to remember Africa by. But again, we know what we produce. We know the mineral resources and the huge minerals that are available in the African continent. But lastly, I think the critic, in spite of Trump's ignorance or lack of knowledge of the African continent, what he's trying to do, especially in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the African Union has tried several times and failed to bring about much needed peace. Trump's motivation is not essentially the love of Africa, really. It's the love of business. He sees everything as a deal. So, if he can, come in and then get something out of it for, America, for his country, and then bring about somehow much needed peace, that would help, because you cannot separate America from some of the crises that has been going on in parts of the world.
Well, a great place to land. Thank you so much for joining us again on the program today. Thank you for your time. And still to come on the program. Kenya's President William Ruto calls protesters attacking police terrorists. Details soon. Welcome back to an update now on the European Commission officials being kicked out of Libya. The Commission has responded by describing the issue as one to do with protocol. European Commission spokesperson Marcus Lammert refuses to speak further on the matter, but maintains the EU is maintaining open channels of communication. Authorities in eastern Libya had refused entry to 3 European ministers and the EU Commissioner for Migration on Tuesday on alleged entry violations, apparently after they stopped first in the rival Libyan capital of Tripoli in the west. A statement from the Prime Minister of the eastern part of Libya, Osama Hamad, said the interior ministers of Italy, Greece, Malta and the EU Migration Commissioner, Magnus Brunner, were persona non grata. He said the ministers had entered illegally and had not followed Libyan diplomatic conventions. The delegation was visiting Libya, seeking tougher migration measures against boats carrying migrants from the country. Namibian President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah has stressed the need for the Global South to gain permanent representation in the United Nations Security Council. The president made the statement during Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's landmark visit to Namibia, the first by an Indian leader in 27 years. The Namibian president emphasizes that current global crises have highlighted the limitations and fragility of multilateralism institutions. During the meeting, Prime Minister Modi and Ms. Nandi-Ndaitwah pledged to strengthen bilateral ties across the wide range of sectors, including defense, digital technology, health, education, and critical minerals. And we're now in Kenya, where families gathered at All Saints Cathedral in Nairobi to honor Boniface Kariuki, a young vendor shot dead during an anti-government protest on the 17th of June. Mr. Boniface, a mask vendor in Nairobi, was shot in the head at close range by a rubber bullet and rushed to the ICU. Died in hospital after several days in coma. He was pronounced brain dead and passed away on the 30th of June. He had joined a protest calling for justice over the death of blogger Albert Ojwang, who was earlier found dead in police custody. According to Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, at least 31 people have died and 107 have been injured amid the ongoing unrest in Kenya.
It pains me a lot knowing today that my friend who was working tirelessly in selling masks just to make a niche, he was shot dead by a police. It also pains as a country knowing that many people have died because of police brutality that have been happening in the country. To the family, the father and the mother, we want to say we will stand with you at this synonymous time. I know the country is at pain and everyone is at pain.
To the family of Boniface Mwangi, Mzee and Mama, Boniface Kariuki, we want it to go out there for those who are observing that Boniface Kariuki is not just a name, a media name out there, but he was a son, a brother, a friend, and a neighbor. And even though his dreams have not been fulfilled the way he wanted to, we believe that God is going to bring justice to all activities that took place. His death is not just a tragedy, but it's a piercing wound to all of us.
Staying in Kenya, President Ruto has called protesters attacking police terrorists and described their actions as a declaration of war. He made the comments at a rally in Nairobi earlier this week. Violent clashes broke out between police and protesters marking the Saba Saba anniversary as large crowds rallied nationwide against police brutality and rising living costs while demanding President Ruto's resignation. In response, authorities closed roads and deployed tear gas to disperse the crowds.
This country will not be destroyed by a few people and who want to have a change of government using unconstitutional means. It is not going to happen. And I want to tell them it is not going to happen. Those who attack our police, those who attack our security men and women, those who attack our security installations, including police stations, that is a declaration of war. That is terrorism. We are going to deal with you firmly.
Well, separately, the president also spoke about his presidency, saying that defending his policies and defending the police right to do everything possible to protect the country's citizens and residents. Authorities have confirmed that over 500 people have been arrested following the protests.
Constitutional right to use whatever means possible to make sure the lives of Kenyans are protected, their property is protected, and they need to take steps to make sure that if life and property is in danger, the police must act accordingly. Honestly, how can anybody say that the police cannot protect the lives and properties of other Kenyans? There is a reason why there is a roadblock. There is a reason why police have tear gas. There is a reason why water cannons are there. They are supposed to be used to protect the lives and property of other Kenyans when they are in danger. So a person who already has security in his house, guarded by the police, in his car, driven by the police, is telling us the property of other Kenyans is not worth being protected by the police.
That's Network Africa today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.